In the age of lucrative franchises, you'll rarely find a comic book movie that exists purely as a standalone entity. If there's not at least one sequel tease in there, or something that could be used to furnish a prequel or spin-off at a push, studios simply aren't doing their jobs. Unfortunately, when the first film ends up being a disaster, the confidence with which a sequel might have been seeded ends up looking more than a little bit ridiculous. There are also those examples out there where film plans end up being changed or dropped entirely between movies, so what we thought we were going to get never materializes, and in some of those cases, the setups included actually looked pretty good. With all that in mind, I'm Will from WhatCulture.com, and this is 8 comic book movie teasers that went absolutely nowhere.
Hey, just quickly to pop in before the list actually starts, I just want to talk to you about That Film Theory. If you don't know what that is yet, it's a brand new channel that's going to be about video essays, cinematic experiences, a bit more relaxed approach. Hopefully we'll see you there. You can find the details down below.
Number 8. Courting Death. The Avengers. In Thanos' first appearance in the MCU, as part of the post-credits stinger on the Avengers, his underling The Other warns that challenging humanity would be akin to courting death, to which the Mad Titan smiles knowingly. It all seemed that we'd be heading towards the Infinity Saga, which would see him literally courting death by wiping out half of existence with the Infinity Gauntlet. But despite Kevin Feige's claims that everything was planned precisely years in advance, the plans for Thanos clearly changed, and the whole Thanos having the hots for the literal incarnation of death thing was dropped entirely. Instead, Thanos was made more of a sympathetic type villain who wanted to restore balance to the universe. Less cartoonish for sure, and in all honesty, probably a better choice. Number 7. The Sinister Six. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. One of the biggest problems with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was its insistence on concentrating on what would come next in Sony's planned Spider-Verse, to the detriment of the film itself. That included its infuriating attempts to set up the planned Sinister Six movie and the revival of Norman Osborn. The sequel hinted that the lineup was going to be Rhino, Vulture, Dr. Octopus, Mysterio, Kraven the Hunter, and the Green Goblin serving as the leader. But sadly for Sony, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 did so poorly at the box office that it ended up being a franchise killer. Not only were both Spider-Man 3 and 4 binned, but so too were the Sinister Six and female-centric spin-offs. Luckily for us, this marked the moment that Sony got round the table with Marvel, and the rest is MCU history. Number 6. The Leader, The Incredible Hulk. In The Incredible Hulk, cellular scientist Dr. Samuel Stearns works with Bruce Banner to unlock the secret of his genetics and to develop an antidote. Abomination attacked Stearns and ended up getting some of Banner's blood into a cut on his head, beginning a mutation. That would have led him down the path to becoming iconic Hulk villain The Leader, presumably in a sequel, as actor Tim Blake Nelson signed on to play him again. But unfortunately, The Incredible Hulk disappointed, and all the plans to have a direct sequel was shelved as Hulk became an Avenger with Mark Ruffalo in the lead. The Leader, meanwhile, was simply never heard from again. At least, not yet, anyway. Number 5. Krypton Returns, Superman Returns. Despite the fact that Lex Luthor's silly new Krypton plan was thwarted in Superman Returns, that wasn't the end of the landmass. After it was thrown into space, the mass continued to grow and settled into orbit between Mars and Jupiter, where it would have been a key plot point in the sequel, which was planned to include both Brainiac and Bizarro. But although Superman Returns might have received positive critical responses, the studios were disappointed. As Warner Bros. President Alan F. Horn explained, it should have done $500 million worldwide. With all that and Warner Bros.' unhappiness with how the character was quote-unquote positioned, any chances of the sequel being made were killed off, and Warner Bros. Moved on to plans to reboot the character instead. Number 4. Silver Surfer Lives, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. After going all heroic and stepping up to Galactus for a showdown that seems to destroy both of them, the Silver Surfer disappears at the end of the second Fantastic Four film. But the Surfer isn't done just yet, and in the mid-credits scene we see his lifeless body floating through space, only for his eyes to open and his board to race towards him. We were supposed to get a Silver Surfer movie, but then Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer performed worse at the box office than the first film, and Fox lost all faith in more films in the same series. The bullet was fired just 2 years after release, with Fox unveiling plans for a reboot, which ended up being a really terrible idea. Number 3. Fisk Swears Revenge, Daredevil. At the end of the disastrous Daredevil movie, whose director's cut is actually not bad at all by the way, Matt Murdock and Kingpin face off for a brutal last fight, with Daredevil coming out on top but refusing to kill the villain. Instead, he's arrested and taken away, screaming bloody revenge on Matt, whose secret identity he now knows. On top of all that setup, the post-credits reveals that Bullseye still has his powers. But the film just didn't cut it, despite Fox having enough confidence to make an equally terrible Elektra spin-off. It's for the best really, since we finally got the perfect Daredevil on Netflix. Number 2, Blade Lives, Blade Trinity. There are actually a couple of alternate endings to Blade Trinity, but the one thing that seemed to be consistent with all of them was that Blade wasn't actually killed in his climactic battle with Drake. In the theatrical version, it's confirmed he's still fighting the war on vampires. In the director's cut, we get a vague hint that he might have lost his humanity and was turning evil, and in the alternate cut, he walks off into the sunset at peace. But in that version, the Night Stalkers had become locked in a war with werewolves, which was supposed to set up their own movie. But unfortunately, the production was beset by issues and poor critical reception killed the franchise, including the Night Stalkers spin-off. So we'll never get to see how Blade finally ended the war. Number 1, Sinestro. The end of Green Lantern sees Sinestro convince the Guardians to forge a yellow ring to defeat Parallax. It doesn't end up being used, as Hal Jordan manages to defeat the villain himself and urges Sinestro not to use the ring. The Stinger, however, shows Sinestro getting his hands on the yellow ring and seemingly becoming possessed by it, foreshadowing his evolution into fully fledged villain. But as Ryan Reynolds himself will tell you, Green Lantern ended up being a disaster, and the planned sequel hit the skids when Warner Bros. Were upset by the negative reviews, so we never got to see the only redeeming thing about the first movie, Mark Strong's performance, actually lead to anything.
Why would you look at that? You got all the way to the end of the video and your mother said you'd amount to nothing. What are the chances? While you're here, why not watch one of our other many possibly quite good channels, or watch another video which will be largely in the same vein as the quality content you've just endured. Go on then.